Hello everyone, welcome to Salesforce Predator. In this channel we discuss about various concepts and technologies. In this video series we are discussing about JavaScript. In today's video we'll see type conversion in JavaScript and type coercion in JavaScript. So these two are very important topic in JavaScript and I would like you to pay attention to it. Okay. So first we'll look into what is type conversion. So whenever a JavaScript developer is working on a particular code, so there may be scenario where he or she wants to convert a value from one data type to another. Okay, and that can be achieved using some built-in functions present in JavaScript. So for example, we have string function to convert any data type into string. Then we have number function to converting the values from different data type into number, and then we have Boolean functions. Okay, so let's look into this in VS Code and let's see how we can achieve this. Okay, so let's go to our VS Code. First we'll look into how we can convert any value into number data type. Okay, let's declare a variable. Let's say to num equals to 25. Now this is a valid number value in JavaScript, correct? So let's say if I try to print this using console log, and what we'll do is we will print the value and we will print the type of this value. Okay, so we already saw type of operator in one of our previous videos, so you can look into it if you have not seen it. And here we can specify the variable name. Now let's save it and execute it. Let's see what we are getting. See, we are getting value over here and the type of this value. Okay, now let's suppose instead of number we had a string over here. Okay, so string of number, let's say we had 25 but as a part of string. So as we know in JavaScript, anything between double quote, single quote or backtick is considered as string, correct? So this is 25 as a string. And let's say now if I try to execute this, what I'll get 25, but the data type of this value is string. Okay, now suppose I wanted to use this in one of my calculations, and that's why I wanted to convert it into number first, right? So what I can do is, in JavaScript we have number method. So what I'll do, I'll just use number of this variable to num. Okay, and assign it to num again. That's it. Now if I try to execute this code, you can see in the output we are getting 25, but the data type is number. Okay, unlike the previous one where it was string, right? So this is how we can convert any value from string to number. Now let's say instead of string we had instead of string 25 we had some actual string. Okay, let's say test. So now what will happen when JavaScript will try to convert this string into number? So will it be possible to do this? So let's try to execute this and we will see. See, uh, JavaScript engine tried to convert this into number, but it cannot convert it, and it was not able to identify what this thing is actually while conversion. So it returned us a result, not a number. That means this string, the value inside this string is not a number. So there is no equivalent number value present for this. So that's why it returned not a number for us, and the data type is changed to number. Okay. Now let's say instead of string we will use some other values and try to convert it. Let's say we'll use undefined. Let's try this. Again it will return a same thing, that it's not a number, and it will change the data type to number, correct? Let's try for some other values like null. Now in general the data type of null is object, right? So let me show you. So if I try to comment this line and try to execute this, so it will return value as null and it is returning data type as object, because this is a bug in JavaScript, and for null it always return the data type as object when we use type of operator on it. Okay, and this also we had discussed in one of our previous video when we were seeing the type of operator. Now let's say if I try to convert this into number, what will happen? what do you think is equivalent of null in number? So let's try to execute this. You can see we are getting 0 over here. That means whenever we try to convert null into number in JavaScript, we get 0 value. So null is equivalent to 0 in number. Okay, and see the type of this number is null. Sorry, number. Now let's say instead of null we have some boolean value, let's say true, and since this is boolean, it should return boolean as a result of type of, but we are converting it into number, so let's see what it will return us. You can see it is returning 1. Now this is important thing. When we are converting from boolean to number in JavaScript, there are two possible values. So true will always return 1 after conversion, and false will always return 0. Okay, so if you want to see, let's try to change this value to false and execute it again. You will see it is returning as 0. So that means false will return 0 and true will return 1 after conversion from boolean to number in JavaScript. Okay. Let's try some other values. Let's say we have some array in JavaScript. Okay. And we already know that data type return for array will be object, right? So let's try it once. Let's have an empty array only, and let's try to execute this without converting it into number. You can see the type of this is object. Okay, but now let's say if I try to convert it into number and now execute it, so what will happen? Again, you can see since it is an empty array, it will return 0 to us and the data type will be number. But what if it was not an empty array? What if some values was there inside this? Let's say we had 33 value inside it, right? So what will happen now? Let's try to execute this. You can see it is returning 33 after conversion into number. Why? Because it was having a single value inside the array. Okay, and it was able to convert it. But what if I don't have a single value? So let's try this. We have two values. Now if I try to execute this, what will happen? You can see it is returning not a number. So when there was one value in array, we were able to convert it into number, and it returned the first element, the element which was present in array as value after conversion into number, right? But when we had more than one value, so JavaScript engine was not able to convert this into number properly. It couldn't find the equivalent of this, and that's why it returned us not a number. However, the data type it returned was number only. Okay. Apart from number, in JavaScript we have some other functions. Let's say I add, instead of array, let's say we have some decimal values also in JavaScript. Okay, so 123.45. Now what do you think it will return after conversion? So it will return number only, correct? So because this floating point is also considered as number in JavaScript. But let's say we will try some other functions instead of number present in JavaScript. So we have one function which is parse int. Okay, so we'll try this parse int. Okay, and now we will check what it is returning. So if I try to execute this, you can see we are getting 1 2 3 and number. That means it is removing the part after decimal and just returning an integer value. That's what parse int does. Okay, so parse int returns the integer part of a decimal in JavaScript. Similar to parse int, we also have parse float. Okay, and what parse float will do, so let's see that. Now let's say if you try to execute this, you can see we are getting the floating point number as it is. Okay, so that is also there. Instead of parse float, we can have one more function, and that is toFixed in JavaScript, and this is again an interesting function. So what we have to do is instead of using parse float, we use the variable dot toFixed. Okay, Now let's try this. Let's see what it is returning. So it's returning in the integer part before the decimal, correct? But here one catch is there. What you can do is you can specify a parameter over here, and this parameter will decide the number of digits it will display after decimal for particular value. Okay, so let's say if I try 1 over here and try to execute this code, you can see it is returning 123.5. That is one decimal after, sorry, one digit after the decimal it is returning. If I had mentioned over here 2, okay, and let's say we had 3 digits after decimal, you can see we are getting this as a result where we have 2 digits after decimal in the result, correct? This is how we can convert values into number data type in JavaScript. Next, we will look into string. So how we can convert values into string data type. Okay. So let's create a variable to string equals to, let's say, test. Okay. We will comment this for now. Let's add a console log over here. To string, and here we'll specify the type of operator for this variable. Okay, to string. Now let's try to execute this. So we should get string as a data type for this test value, right? Now let's suppose instead of test we have a number over here, 1 2 3 4. Okay, now let's say try to execute this. We will get number here. Now if I want to convert this into string, convert this number into string, so what I can do is I can use toString equals to string of this variable. Okay, now try to execute this. You can see we are getting string, right? So this 1 2 3 number has been converted into string now. Now let's say instead of number we have something else. Let's say we have null. So what will happen now? You can see null is converted into string. Let's try for undefined. You can see undefined is also converted into string. Let's try for some other, let's say an empty array. Let's try to execute this. You can see this empty array has been converted into an empty string. Okay, so here it's not printing because it's an empty string. You can see the data type it is returning is string only. Okay, now let's suppose we have variable here, some values inside this array. Now let's try to execute this. You can see it is getting converted into string, and when this array is getting converted into string using this string conversion, what's happening is it's taking all the values inside this square bracket including comma. Okay, so to demonstrate this, let's say we will try the length property of this. Okay, if I try the length property of this, let's execute this. You can see we are getting 3 as a length. That means it's taking everything inside this square bracket, so 1 comma 2. So this is actually the string which it is returning from this array when we are converting this array into a string using this string operation. Okay, and this is important to be noted over here. Now suppose instead of array we are using some boolean value, so that will be again converted into string only directly. Let's try this. You can see it is getting converted into string. So string conversion is easy over here. Now let's say instead of using this string function, we have one more function which is dot to string. Okay, let's try this. And here what we'll do, we will use to string equals to this. Okay, now let's try to execute this. You can see we are getting string as a return type for this data, sorry, this value, and this is the value which we got. Okay, now this was all about converting values into string data type. Let's go and check for boolean now. Let's comment this code for now. Okay, now before discussing the conversion into Boolean, there is something which I would like you to know, and that is falsy values in Boolean. Okay. Now, there are certain values whose conversion into Boolean will always return false. Okay, and that's why these values are called as falsy values in Boolean. Apart from these values, if you try to convert anything into Boolean, so it will always return true. Okay, so let me list down these values first so that you can note it down somewhere. So it's null, then we have undefined, we have nan, okay, then we have empty string, 0, then 0 of begint, and false. Okay, so these values, when you try to convert it into Boolean, so it will always return false. Okay, so let's try for some of them. We will just add a comment over here, and let's try for some of the values. Let's try console.log of. Here we'll have one variable, let to Boolean equals to null. Okay, and Boolean of to Boolean, and here we'll have to Boolean on the left hand side also. Okay, and what we'll do is we will print the value space type of this variable. Okay, so we have assigned null value initially to this variable, and then we have tried to convert it into a Boolean, and now we are printing it. Okay, so let's see what we are getting. You can see we are getting value false. Okay, so that means when we are converting null into Boolean, it is always returning us false. Let's try for undefined. You can see here also we are getting false. For empty string, again we are getting false. For 0, we'll get false. For 0n, that is begin 0, we'll get false again. Okay, now let's say instead of true, instead of false, we are using, let's say, true. So what we'll get? We'll get the value as true, and the data type is Boolean. Apart from these value, if I try any value, let's say I try an array, suppose, okay, an empty array. Now if I try to execute this, see what I'm getting? True only. If I am using any string, let's say test string, and try to execute this, again I'll get true only. Okay, so these are the falsy values in JavaScript, and when we are converting these into Boolean, it will always return false. And apart from these, if any value is there and if we are trying to convert them, so it will always return true in JavaScript. Okay, so this is important thing to be remembered. Okay, this was all about type conversion in JavaScript. So we'll move on to next topic, and that is type coercion in JavaScript. Okay, now apart from developer manually converting values from one data type to another using built-in function in JavaScript, there are situations or scenarios where compiler of a JavaScript itself convert values from one data type to another implicitly. Okay, so let's say during some expression evaluations, we have multiple data type variables present over there. So in that scenarios, to evaluate certain results, JavaScript compiler may convert one value from one data type to another data type. Okay, and this process is called type coercion. There are certain rules. While we cannot exactly predict the expression results, but there are certain rules. So for example, if during an expression evaluation there is a string operand present over there, so what will happen is JavaScript will convert the operand also into string. Okay, so whenever there is a string during an expression evaluation, the other uh, operands like numbers are there, so those will also be converted into string. Okay, now let's say we don't have string on either side of operand. Okay, and all other operands are primitive only, so in that scenarios it will convert the rest of the operands into number only. Okay, and one more thing, array and object, so these are considered as string before conversion in JavaScript. Okay, so let's look into the examples, so there you will understand it in better way. Here you might get confused. Okay, so let's go to our VS Code and let's comment the existing things, and here we will see type coercion in JavaScript. Okay, so let's consider an expression. We have, let's say, a string test, and we are using plus operator here, and we have some number. Okay, now what do you think result would be? Let's try this. We already saw that whenever string is there in an operation, and on the either side of operand operator we have a string, so the other operand will also be converted into string, and it will result in a concatenation operation over here. Okay, so let's try this. Result is result. Let's execute this. You can see it is returning test3, that is, it is doing the concatenation instead of adding up this. Okay, now if there was a number here instead of string, so it would have returned 9 by doing the mathematical addition operation. Okay, but string is there, that's why it concatenated. Let's check the type of result over here. So what we'll do is we'll remove this, and here we'll apply type of on the result. Okay, let's execute this. You can see the result is 9 and the return type is number. Okay, now let's say we have a complex operation. Let's say we have 6 plus test plus 3, right? So now what will happen? First it will check for these two, and it will return a string, right? Because string plus number will be string only, and then final string will be added to this 3, so it will be 6 test 3, right? Just try this. Yeah, it is 6 test 3. Okay, let's suppose we take string out of this and we'll try with number. So let's say we have a 6 number, and along with that we have object. Okay, so we already saw that object is also considered as string, and or converted to a string before any operation, right? So let's try this. Let's key will be name, and let's say this is the value. Now we will just execute this. You can see the type of this result is string, and this 6 is appended with this object. Okay, similarly if we try with array, so that will also be converted to string. Okay, so let's try this. You can see it is 6 then 7 comma 8. Okay, so we have already seen that inside square bracket is what it will considered, right? So 7 comma 8, so this will be a string, and then it will be appended to 6, which is what it is showing here in the result. Okay, and the type is string only. Now just consider some other values. Let's say undefined. Now in case of number, along with any other data type apart from string, the conversion will be into number only, right? So let's try with 6 plus undefined. You can see it is returning NaN. Why? Because while converting the undefined into number, it couldn't find the corresponding value here in the number. right? So that's why it returned nan plus 6. Okay, I can directly show you this. Let's say nan, right, and try this. So it will return nan only. Okay, let's try with null. So it returning 6, and the type of this result is number. Why? Because null after conversion into integer, so it will be 0, right? We have already seen this. Why? Because null after conversion into number will be 0. We have already seen this, right? So if I, let's say, try this number of null, so it returns 0, right? And this is what JavaScript internally do when executing this expression. Okay, so it will check this operand is number, so, and we do not have any string over here, so it will convert this null into number internally, which will result in 0, and then 6 plus 0 will return 6, and the type of this result will be number. Okay, so this is how type coercion work in JavaScript. Okay, so this is all about type conversion and type coercion in JavaScript. If you have any questions, you can write it down in the comment section. Thank you for watching this video, and do not forget to subscribe.